In February of 2010, the world watched in shock as trainer Dawn Brancheau died during a performance with an orca at SeaWorld. The animal involved was Tilikum, a male of nearly 6 tons who until then had been presented as a symbol of harmony between humans and wildlife. But that tragedy didn't come out of nowhere. It was the final point in a story marked by violent capture, years of confinement, isolation, and extreme stress. Tilikum's saga is not only the story of an orca in captivity, but an unsettling portrait of the human consequences of turning wild animals into entertainment. And that's exactly what you're going to see here today. So leave your like, click the subscribe button down below, and let's go. Tilikum's story begins in the early 1980s in the North Atlantic near Iceland, where he was born around 1981 within a stable family group, as is typical for orcas. These animals live in complex social structures with bonds that last a lifetime, learn hunting techniques from their mothers, and communicate through their own dialects. In 1983, when Tilikum was about 2 years old, his life was violently interrupted by a commercial capture operation. Helicopters and boats were used to herd an entire group of orcas, separating calves from their mothers amid widespread panic. Accounts from former fishermen involved in this type of operation indicate that adults injured or considered useless for sale were killed right there. Tilikum was ripped from his family and transported to Sealand of the Pacific, a marine park located in Victoria, Canada, beginning a trajectory marked by confinement, stress, and profound psychological suffering. At Sealand, Tilikum was placed in an extremely small, inadequate tank for an animal that, in the wild, can swim dozens of kilometers per day. He shared the space with 2 older dominant female orcas, Haida 2 and Nootka 4. The coexistence was forced and violent. With no possibility of escape, Tilikum was constantly bitten, chased, and prevented from feeding properly. The visible scars on his body over the years were clear signs of this continuous aggression. At night, when there were no shows, he was often isolated in an even smaller tank without natural light, which worsened his stress even further. Animal behavior specialists point out that this kind of sensory and social isolation can cause psychological damage comparable to severe disorders in humans. It was in this environment that Tilikum began developing abnormal behaviors such as lethargy, extreme submission, and unpredictable responses. On February 20th, 1991, the first fatal episode associated with him occurred. Kelty Byrne, a young 20-year-old trainer, slipped and fell into the tank during work. What followed was a desperate scene. The 3 orcas present began interacting with Kelty's body in a way that prevented any rescue attempt. Witnesses reported that she tried to cling to the edges of the tank while being pulled back into the water repeatedly. There were no clear signs of a predatory attack. The behavior was described as a kind of distorted play, something common in extremely intelligent animals deprived of adequate stimulation. After several minutes, Kelty died by drowning. The episode shocked Canada and exposed the park's precarious conditions to the public. Shortly afterwards, Sealand of the Pacific permanently closed its doors. Even with this history, Tilikum was not retired or sent to a sanctuary. In 1992, he was purchased by SeaWorld Orlando. The official justification was that the park had better facilities and greater capacity for management, but in practice, Tilikum was used mainly as a breeder. His impressive size and genetics were considered valuable to SeaWorld's captive breeding program. Over the years, he was kept isolated from other orcas much of the time and physically separated from trainers for safety reasons. Even so, he became the father of at least 14 calves, spreading his lineage across multiple parks, which later generated deep criticism about perpetuating captivity through forced reproduction. In 1999, another tragic episode occurred. Daniel Paul Dukes, a 27-year-old man, broke into SeaWorld overnight after the park closed. The next morning, his body was found inside Tilikum's tank. He was naked and showed signs of drowning and trauma. Investigations concluded that Dukes entered the tank voluntarily, and SeaWorld treated the case as an illegal trespass, minimizing the animal's responsibility. Even so, the fact that a human body was found with Tilikum reinforced his public image as a dangerous orca, while also raising raising new questions about security and about the psychological impact of prolonged confinement. The most striking episode, and the one that would definitively change Tilikum's history, happened on February 24th, 2010. Dawn Brancheau, a highly experienced and respected trainer, had just led a performance with him. Dawn had worked with orcas for years and was considered one of SeaWorld's most capable professionals. After the show, while conducting a routine interaction at the edge of the tank, Tilikum grabbed Dawn, possibly by the hair or the arm, and violently pulled her into the water. What followed was a prolonged, chaotic attack in which he held her submerged repeatedly. The incident was witnessed by employees and visitors, causing widespread panic. Dawn lost her life by drowning and also suffered multiple fractures and severe trauma. Her death had an immediate and irreversible global impact. The consequences were profound. The United States Workplace Safety Agency, OSHA, investigated SeaWorld and concluded that the park exposed its employees to known risks. SeaWorld was fined and forced to implement drastic changes, including a definitive ban on trainers entering the water with orcas during performances. More than that, Tilikum's story became the center of the documentary Blackfish, released in 2013. The film presented the animal's full history of suffering to the general public, the fatalities associated with him, and the direct relationship between captivity, chronic stress, and aggressive behavior. The cultural impact was enormous. SeaWorld suffered a significant drop in attendance, lost sponsors, and was forced to review its practices, later announcing the gradual end of captive orca breeding. In his final years, Tilikum's health declined increasingly. He developed chronic lung infections and spent long periods under intensive veterinary treatment. Even so, he remained confined until the end. On January 6, 2017, Tilikum died at approximately 36 years of age, a life expectancy far below that of male orcas in the wild, which can live between 60 and 80 years. Tilikum's legacy is complex and deeply symbolic. He was not a monster or a conscious killer, but a wild animal, highly intelligent and emotional, subjected to a life of extreme deprivation from a very young age. His trajectory exposed the psychological consequences of captivity, challenged the narrative that orcas can be fully controlled, and forced a global ethical reassessment of using these animals for human entertainment. Today, the name Tilikum remains a painful milestone, reminding us that his aggression was, to a large extent, a direct reflection of the artificial environment and the suffering imposed on him throughout his entire life. Don't forget to subscribe to watch more videos like this.